In this video, we're going to be building a login form, and this login form is going to have three types of animations. It's going to have, a dynamic background, a fade in for the form, and also a fade up for each of the form fields and the button. So we're going to cover that today, and it's going to be a overall great practice for, if you're learning animations, learning transitions. We're going to cover all of that in this video. So let's hop right in. What I've got started today is, a blank slate for what we're going to be building, and I've got two sets of files. I got the files that we're going to be building, and then also the final solution as well. And we're going to go through it. We have the final styles, the final index.html, as well as some notes as we're going through everything. So wanted to get it all set up, and then we can go ahead and get started. So we can go ahead and close out the final solution, and we can go ahead and start with the HTML. So whenever you want to start something like this, you want to start with the HTML first. It's best place to be. And we're gonna go ahead and first start off with a div, and we're gonna go ahead and make this div with a class of login container. And then we're going to add a h2, and we're going to say login. And then we're going to add another div. We're going to say a class of form group. So these form groups are going to be the individual form fields. So we're going to have two of those. And then we're going to add the fields, or we'll add the fields within the form group. So we're going to say, well, actually, let's first wrap this in a form before we dive right in. So we're going to have the container, we're going to have the form wrapper, and then we're going to say input. We're going to say type equals text. We're going to say ID equals username, name equals username, and then we're going to say it's required, and then we're going to have a placeholder of just a space, and we're gonna work on that later. And if you see, here in the final solution, we're starting with a blank, just a space placeholder, but then we're going to add a label that's gonna kind of be that placeholder, and then it's gonna go outside like so. So that's what we're gonna be working on. So we're starting with a blank for now, and then we're going to have the label. Normally I put the label before input, but in this case we're going to put it here after, because we're going to use a certain type of selector to be able to manipulate the label so that it appears inside the input and then shows up outside once you click within. So we're going to go through all that, and perfect. And then we're going to go ahead and do the other form group, and that's going to be input type of password. We're going to have an ID of password, a name of password, and then we're going to say it's required, and a placeholder as well, space. Okay, and then we're going to say label password. Okay, and then as a final, so we've added the username field, the password field, and then as a final we're going to say button type equals submit, and we're going to say sign in like so. So we'll see it here, login, username, password, sign in. We also, an alternative is using an input field of type submit and a value of submit like so. And that'll also get you a button. You'll see that in the browser. You can think of that, from at least as far as I'm aware, the input is a bit more of an older version of a button. It's less, less customizable, you can say. So you can still use an input type of button, but in this case, since we're styling it a lot more, we're gonna want to use a type of button, a button element with the type of submit, and then we're going to say sign in instead. So those are the two types. You can use the button element or you can use the input. We've got the two fields within the form. We can go ahead and format this. So we've got, the form, we've got the two fields, we've got the button, and we've got the login, and then we've got the container. The fields, you've got the, type of text, type of password, where essentially inputs, different fields have different types of types, and you want to be as specific as you possible when you're building out your form. And then you've got ID, name. These are all attributes, required and placeholder, all HTML attributes. ID is going to be, more of the, you can think client side of a form. It's where, for one, actually, label is going to be targeting that ID. So the for, like, what label is this? What field is this label for? Well, it's for the field with the ID username. So we're targeting it that way. Password, like so. Okay, and same with this other field, label for the field with the ID of password. We're targeting that, so that's more client side. You also can target in CSS styling with the ID as well. That's an option. But in general, think of the ID attribute as more client side. Now the name, you can think of in more server side in a way. So name is if you were to set up a server, a backend for this form, you wanted to submit this data somewhere, you would essentially, this name would be the key to whatever value someone puts in the field. So for their username and password. We're not going to be setting up server side today. It's just client side, but in future videos we can go through the whole process. But I wanted to just focus on animations in this exercise, this tutorial that we're doing. You've got required. Essentially, we're just saying, hey, we want the user to make sure they fill this out, and you can't submit the form until you fill it out. Add some text there, and then a placeholder. We're just using that. Normally, you could use this as in our final example. That would look like a placeholder, like so. You'd have some text in the field, but in this case, we're doing just a space here for now, and then we're going to add the text later. So just wanted to highlight all of that, and that should be everything. Let's just, before we move on, let's just verify our work here. So login container, yes. Okay, looks good to me. Okay, great. So step one is done, HTML form. Now the next step is going to be, doing the CSS, that second step. To link your CSS to your HTML, generally you should always have that separate for the most part. But here is you're using a link element to link to your styles. So you want to have this. This is essentially it's the only way to let the HTML know, or this page know, that hey, the CSS is associated with this page that we're working on. So I've gone ahead and done that. I've done the link element. I've done an href attribute, which is specifying, hey, where can we find this CSS? And in this case, it's that practice.css file on the left-hand side. So I'm specifying it here. The rel is for relationship. What is the relationship of this CSS page to the HTML file that we're working with? Well, the CSS is a style sheet, and so that's what we're specifying here, these two attributes. And once you have that, you're good to go, and we can hop right into the CSS. Now for CSS, how you want to think about this is generally you want to start outwards and work your way inwards, and focus on one element at a time. In this case, where normally for CSS you can use like a reset CSS file to neutralize the styles from the browser. You have all different types of browsers. You've got Chrome, Firefox, Safari, Brave, etc. You've got all these different types, but neutralizing it is a great way to make sure your website or project stays consistent across the browsers. In this case, instead of a reset CSS, we're using a universal selector to do something similar. Essentially, we're saying box sizing, border box. We're saying box size and border box. We're saying margin 0, and we're saying padding 0. Perfect. Okay. And then we can get to the body. Now, so generally with styles, I also want to think about it not just, working from outward elements. So in the HTML here, We've got outward elements like the body, then the login container, then the form group. We're working our way inward with the elements, but also when you're styling, it's, could be helpful to think about the styles in working your way inward as well. So, up here, I've got box sizing, just a general border box is the style I want for all my containers and elements. That, essentially factors in the width and height based on, all of the, the padding, the margin, the border, etc. So that's why it's called border box. And then you work your way inward. So you've got margin on the outside, then you got padding on the inside, and you can kind of slowly style going inward. So that's another way to approach it. So universal selectors first, then we got the body. And we want to start off with hey, what's a generalized, body style? We want to do the font family. So we want to use this font family for today. We want to say that, okay, so we've got the font family. We want to say the height is 100% viewport height. By default in the browser, it should be 100% viewport width. And so that's why we're just using 100% viewport height to take up not just the width, but also the height, because by default it should just be the height of the elements that are within the browser. It's not going to be the full viewport height. And so we're specifying that today just to get this full screen where we're going to put the login form. So we've got the height. Next thing we got is display flex. We want to use flex. So there's a lot of ways you can center a div. You can do margin auto, all these different things. But in this case we're using flex. It's really easy to use. You've got different types of flex or different types of formatting. You can say the main ones, or the two big ones, are flex and grid. In the past, you could use tables to format a website, but display flex and display grid are essentially the main types in HTML and CSS that you can use to format elements in a browser. Flex is going to be more for maybe smaller projects and things, but when you have maybe lots of elements, you might want to consider grid. But a lot of projects, even websites, you can get pretty far with just using flex. Grid is, can have a little bit more, customization with the columns and the rows, but with, flex, you can do quite a bit for, modern day websites, I would say. So display flex is what we're doing. There's different types of, properties that you can use for flex. And the most common one you might be using a lot is going to be justify content center and align item center. So justify content center and align item center, and you'll see that's going to put the form, this element, in the center, like so. So justify content center, align item center, and then we've got, we want to also do the background. Let's get our background for today, and that's going to be a gradient, and I'm just copying that in today. Like so. So we got a background, perfect. So we're centering the form, we've got the background. We want to also say, hey, this background, we want to say background size 100%. This is going to be, just useful, as we're getting into animations, to just have some like neutral default settings, just for our clarity and visibility as we're building animations. We're going to say background size 100%. We're going to say background repeat, no repeat. So if you have, a background, let's say more related to like an image, if an image can take up the full container, it's going to start repeating itself. And so, specifying no repeat is a great way to avoid that repetition. And if we take a look, there's our background. And, you can make this gradient however you'd like. We're just, using, 3 different types of colors. We're going to make this dynamic. And you're gonna see that in the final solution. I've slowed it down a lot, but I'll show you at a faster speed so you can kind of customize the dynamic background however you'd like, but just wanted to make it a little bit more subtle. So we've got background size, background repeat. Now the next thing we can do is hop into the first animation that we're going to work on. So that's going to be keyframes. At keyframes, we want to specify the animation. So whenever you're building an animation, you've got two parts to it. The first part is going to be the keyframe, and the second part is going to be using the animation selector, or the animation declaration. And that a declaration is just one of these here. Background, background size, background repeat. Those are declarations. the body, whatever's here is going to be the selector that you're using, and then this is going to be the animation. Animation, starts with at keyframes. If you're doing responsive design, you're using at media, so that's something else, but it looks kind of similar to a media query for responsive design. So at keyframes, specify, you can come up whatever name you want to use. It doesn't have to be something specific, but it's good to make it as relatable to whatever animation you're building. So at keyframes, background zoom, and we want to go ahead and start making our breakpoints, or our specifying, how is this animation going to work. So to do that, you're using, percentages and curly braces to specify that. So we're going to say, background size, and we're going to say is 100%, and background position is going to be center. So some default starting point. Our starting point is make it 100% of the screen and center. Then we're going to have, for this animation, we're having 50%, and we're going to have 100%. Background size, we're going to say 150%. And then we're going to say background position is going to be top left. And then we're going to say background size 200%, and we're going to say background position bottom right. Okay, like so. So this animation, background size, background position, center, top left, bottom right, we're going to be, building. This is how the animation is going to work. It's going to start in the center, it's going to move up to the top left, and move them down to the bottom right is kind of the flow. So once we build our animation with keyframes, we're going to use the animation declaration to explain, how this is going to go down in the browser. This is, what is the animation, and this is, how it's going to, play out. So we're going to specify, background zoom. We're going to say 20 seconds. We're going to say this is ease in, a timing function, ease in and out, and then we're going to say infinite. Want to have this run forever, multiple times. The duration, essentially, or duration is 20 seconds, and then this is like how often, and then you're going to say alternate. And so alternate is going to, for this animation, is going to start from at the center, top left, bottom right, and then it's going to go backwards. So bottom right, top left, center. So it's going to loop like this versus, loop, and then go all the way back to the start. It's going to go one way, and then it's going to go the other way. So it's going to make it, a bit more, flowy. And if we save that, we can actually slow this down so you can actually see it. So I'm going to make it 1 second. So here, you should be able to see that it's turning light and dark, and it's moving, essentially moving around. But that's how that animation is working. So you can pick different colors. You can make it more aggressive. You can slow it down. I'm slowing it down, but this is at 1 second, and it's going infinite. And so that's why you're seeing that color change. And I'm just going to slow it down to 20 seconds. And so it's going to be a lot, just more subtle, just a little subtle touch. But that's the first animation that we're working on. Okay. Now, the next thing that we want to do is we're going to want to, build the, work on the form container, and we're going to go ahead and do that. So let's go ahead and hop to that next part, and we'll break it down. So we've got the login container. So we've done the background. Now we want to, start working with the login container, and you're working your way inward for this as well. So we've got, a width of 100%. So we're taking up the full width. We want to say, hey, a max width of, we're only going to use 300 pixels today. So max width 380 pixels. And then we're going to say, and that's going to be helpful, with responsiveness. And then we're going to say background color. We're going to say white. We're going to say padding, 2.5 rem and 3 rem. And rem is associated, so rem, how it works is it's associated with the font size. So with font size, so by default in the browser, it's around it's 16 pixels. It should be, for the browser, 16 pixels. And then sizing it's helpful for responsive design. Rem is essentially multiplied by that 16 pixels, or whatever the default font size is. It's going to be based off that. So if you were to shrink down the font size for smaller devices like mobile phone, the padding will then adjust accordingly, which is really cool and really helpful in this case. So in this case, this will be 2.5 rem. It'll be 40 pixels. So 16 times 2.5 is 40 pixels. And then you've got 3 rem, which is 48 pixels. So the top and bottom, so padding, we're doing top and bottom, 2.5 rem. And then left and right is going to be 3 rem. And we'll see that here. We'll add a bit of spacing, like so. And then we made a white background. The next thing we want to do is add a border radius. It's going to curve out, soften out the edges. And we want to use 14 pixels. And then we want to add a box shadow of 0, 12 pixels, 30 pixels. And then we're doing RGBA 0, 0, 0, 0.1, like so. And then we're going to add our second animation. So you'll see that shadow, you'll see the edges curved, and we've worked on just the outside container. We did the background first, now we're moving inward. We did the form or the container itself on the outside, and now we're going to add that second animation. So the 2 steps, like I mentioned, start with the keyframe. We're building that out. At keyframes, this one's going to be called scale fade in, like so. And no, this isn't a function. Okay, scale fade in, and we're gonna say 0%, and we're gonna say 100%. This is gonna be just a pretty basic animation. We're gonna say, actually, let's put 0. We're gonna say scale. So we're gonna say, opacity. I'm blanking on what did I do in the past. Okay, so opacity 0. We're gonna say transform scale, and we're gonna say 0.95, and then we're gonna say opacity 1, and then we're gonna say transform scale 1, like so. Okay. So there we go. So we've got essentially for this animation, we're going to say, hey, it's going to start invisible, and then it's going to become visible at a 1, opacity 1. We've got transform. We're going to have it slightly smaller, 0.95, and then we're going to make it bigger. It's going to be 1. It's going to go to the full size. And then here in the animation, we want to say the name, so scale fade in. We want to say it's going to be lasting for 1 second, and then it's going to ease out. So it's going to start a little bit faster, and then it's going to get softer, like so. And then we will see it up here when we refresh, like so. So it's slowly fading in. It's slowly fading in and increasing in size, and that's animation number 2. And let's see if this makes it better. Opacity 0. Let's go ahead. We'll leave that out. That should be fine. Okay. Great. Okay, so this is this first one. Next, we want to go to the next option. It's going to be the dot. We're going to style the heading. So dot login container h2. We're going to say, hey, text align. So we're styling this login. We're going to say, hey, text align. We want this to go in the center of the form. Text align, margin bottom. We want to give some space underneath the login. We're going to say, hey, margin bottom 2 rem, so that'll be 32 pixels. We're going to say, hey, make this color 333. Let's say we're going to, let's start there first. Okay. So there, all we did was just, move it to the center, add some padding, or add some margin. And that's it, yeah. And then we added the color. Now we're going to go to the animation, so this is the next thing. And this, I want to show you something really quick on this. So at keyframes, this is going to be fade up. We're being descriptive with our names. At keyframes, we're going to say 0%. We're going to say opacity 0, and then we're saying transform, translate Y by 10 pixels, because we want it to go down. So it's the opposite of math. Translate Y, when it's positive number, think down, and when it's negative, think up. It's just because of how the pixels are displayed on the screen. It starts from the top and works its way down, and so that's why plus 10 is going down. Okay, and then you got 100%. You want opacity of 1. You want opacity 1. Ooh. You want transform, translate Y, and we want it to be 0 pixels. Actually, you just specify 0 when it's 0. You don't need to do the pixels. Okay, and then we want to say, hey, animation for our H2 is going to be ooh, I'm blanking, fade up. We want it to be 0.8 seconds, a little bit slower. We want to say ease out, and then we want to give it a delay of 0.2. So at total, it's 1 second. So the other animation was 1 second for the fade into the form, but we want to delay it a little bit so the form starts to appear first before we show everything. And then we want to say forwards. So it's going to retain the styles at the end. So this is a new one, forward. So for the animation, you've got the name of the animation. The duration is lasting 0.8 seconds. You could do milliseconds too, 800 milliseconds. Ease out, so it's going to start fast and slow. And then 0.2 is the delay. It's only happening once, so we don't need to specify that. But you can say like how many times you want it. And then we've got forwards. We're saying at the end of the animation, retain the styles. And so you will see that like so. So it'll start and move up and then stay at the top. It won't go back down. So if we didn't have that, it would go back down, or it should. Let's see. So, okay. So forwards, it's going to retain the styles at the end of the animation, like so. And then what you're seeing here is you're seeing that little flicker. It's starting here and then moving down. So what's always good, essentially, before an animation, is to specify opacity, 0. You want to, a base animation, a base style is that you specify here, a base declaration with a style value, and then you're starting the animation. So you want to, give it something so there's not that flicker. Okay, like so. Perfect. Okay. So we've gone ahead and done that. Now we want to go ahead and move to the next thing. So we've done all 3 animations, and then we're gonna finish the form off. But these are the 3 animations we're gonna be using. So let's go ahead and get things a bit organized. Okay. Okay, let's just move things down. So that's all we're doing. We're just organizing right now, just moving our keyframes at the bottom here. Everything still works, like so. And so now we're going to try to get it to here. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that now. So let's go to the next thing. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is style the form fields, and that's going to be form group. And we're going to give it a position of relative because we want the internal elements to be adjusted based off of the outer form field. And so that's why we're giving it position relative. By default, it's position static. So we're going to say margin bottom. We're going to say, hey, we want to give some space, some breathing room underneath the form field, 1.75 rem. We're going to say opacity. Yeah, we're going to say opacity 0 because we're going to add an animation. And then we're going to say, the animation is also a fade up. So same as the header, 0.6 seconds, ease, and forwards. So ease is kind of similar to ease in and out, but ease in and out is a bit more like more rigid on the flow, and ease is a bit more, is not exactly the same at the start and the end from what I can gather off that. But yeah, ease is kind of similar to ease in and out, you can say. So we've got oh, that's not even the one. Okay, so here we space things out. We just added some space. Okay, to the form fields. Now we want to go to so you see, if we go, we'll see that the form fields are all loading at the same time or fading up at the same time. We want to stagger it. We don't want that to happen. So instead, we're going to say form group. Then we're going to say nth child 2. And then we're going to say dot form group nth child 3. And we're going to say animation delay of 0.4 seconds. Animation delay of 0.6 seconds, like so. And so now it's going to stagger 1, 2, like so, 1, 2. And the reason, so nth child is essentially saying within the form group, the child, the second child, that's the form group, that's going to be this one, this number 2 here. It's the second, and then this is the third. So 2 and 3. So nth child 2 and 3. Okay. Now the next thing we want to do is style the input. Form group input, and we're gonna say width of 100%. So we want it to take up the full space. We want it to add some padding, 1 rem and 0.75 rem. We want a border of 1 pixel solid CCC. And then we've got the border radius of 8 pixels. We've got font size of 1 rem. Background color is going to be transparent, like so. And then outline is going to be none, so no outline. And that's going to be when you click in. If you don't have outline, like so, if you click in, it's going to show that outline. We don't want that. We're going to do that style later, so that's why we're removing it. So all we've done is just add some styling. Now we're going to work on the label. We don't want that to show there. We want it to show within. And so we're going to go ahead and style that. So I can actually, put this next door. Okay, still good on battery. Perfect. Okay. So let's go ahead and form group input. And we're going to do form group label. And so that's all we're doing. We're working our way inwards, like I mentioned. We're going to say position absolute because, we already said position relative for the form groups. This is a group, this is a group. We're going to say position absolute. We're going to say left 0.75 rem. We're going to say top 50%. Okay, so this is pretty cool. Okay, so basically we're saying, hey, absolute, take this out of the flow, like so. So taking it out of the flow, move it, and we're gonna say top 50%. So it's gonna move it away from the left side, 0.75 rem. So that's why it comes out to the right. And then you've got top 50%. It's going to put it in the middle of the group or the form field, but it's going to be based off the top of username. And so it doesn't look like it's in the middle, clearly. So to fix that, you're using both top 50% and then translate, and that's going to be 50% or minus 50%. Okay, so and you'll see that now it's in the middle. So translate 50% is translate by itself and center it in the middle of like username. It's going to put it in the middle there of negative 50%. So that moves it up. Like I talked about, negative means positive in this case. Cool. And so that's done. We want to say background color of white. We want to say padding padding of 0.3 rem. And then we're going to say color of AAA. It's going to make it softer. You see, like so. We're going to say pointer events, none. And that's just because we're using pointer events because we don't want that label to affect us clicking in the box. So that's why we're saying, you know, because it's on top. So pointer events, none. And then transition is going to be 0.3 seconds. And we're going to get to transition later. But transition 0.3. Okay. And then we're going to go to well, first let's, you know, before we wrap things up, let's go ahead and do the button. Let's style the button so it's a bit more stylish. We can say width 100%. We're gonna say padding, added some space around it, around the top, left, right, and bottom. We're gonna say border none. We don't want that. Let's get rid of it. Border radius, let's say 8 pixels. It's gonna curve it. We're gonna say background color. I'm gonna grab that from the notes. Background color, and we're gonna say background color. We're gonna say color of the text is gonna be white. Font size, we're gonna increase the size a bit of the sign in. We're going to say the cursor, when you hover over it, is gonna be pointer. So it's gonna turn into a pointer, which is gonna be helpful. And we want to say transition, background color, 0.3 seconds. And that's just, that's gonna be helpful for the hover. And so we're gonna get to that. We wanna have also this animation here of fade up. So we added fade up to the header, to the fields. Now we want it for the button. We're saying fade up 0.6 seconds, ease 0.8 seconds. So we're adding a delay. This is 0.4, this is 0.6. We're adding 0.8 here, and then we're gonna say, hey, keep your final destination forwards, and then we're gonna say, because we're getting that flickering, we want to say opacity 0, and then that should help, like so. Okay, much better. And then now with that transition, this is more of the starter point of learning animations. Transitions is more of a basic one, and so we're gonna say button hover. We're gonna say background color, here. So when you hover, it's gonna transition. So if we didn't have transition, it would be just very drastic. And so we're adding, hey, a little transition, make that a little smoother when you hover, like so. Okay, great. Now as a final step, we want to go ahead and add the, we want to move this, when we click in, we want it to move up, like so. And so we're gonna deal with that now. And that's gonna be form group, and we're gonna say input when we're in focus, and then we're gonna say dot form group input, and we're gonna say not placeholder shown, like so. And then we're gonna do this twice again, but we're gonna say plus the label, and then we're going to say plus the label. So this first one is going to be, we're going to say this is going to be the border. So I'm just going to add this and then explain it. Border color. So border color of that. So when we click in, like so, and then we're going to say here, we want to say the color when it's not there. We're gonna say top -0.6 rem, left 0.6 rem, and we're gonna shrink the font size, 0.75 rem. Okay, like so. So now, so how this works, let's break it down with the last 2% of my battery. So essentially, we're using a pseudo class. We're using two pseudo classes here: the not pseudo class and then placeholder shown. Input for the border color, it says when it's in focus, when you click on it, change the border color, and also when the placeholder is not there. So if you had a text like so, the placeholder, it's not there, but the border stays the same. Now to move it up, we're saying we're using a sibling selector with the label, and we're saying, hey, in this case, we're selecting the label in both cases, the same as before, and we're moving it up absolute, and we're saying, top -6 left, like so, when you click on it. So we're moving the location of it, and we're shrinking it and giving it that color. Okay, and so this is the final solution, like so. And we can compare that. Perfect. So overall, that's just a brief, overview of animations in more of a real life setting. Thanks so much for watching, and I'm glad we got to make it through with the battery. And there's gonna be more to come, so stay tuned for that. Thanks so much, and have a great day.